So we're going to move on now to the panel discussion, and this gives you a chance to pose your questions and your thoughts, and we've already had some of those, so keep them coming into the question and answer section. And delighted to welcome our panel today. Thanks so much for joining us. So we have Albert Heaney, who's the Deputy Director General for Health and Social Services at Welsh Government. Thank you, Albert, for joining us. Anne Williams, who's the Manager of the Live Fear Free Helpline, and Rachel Nicholson, who's Director of Performance and Partnerships at Hourglass and Director of Hourglass Cymru. So a fantastic panel. Thank you all very much for joining us. So I'm just going to start really with a general question for you all, and then we'll start picking up the questions that people are sending in. Albert, if I could start with you really, just to get your reflections on what you've heard on the report and your thoughts on the action that we can take in the future.
Yeah, Diolch. Thank you, Alina. Bordar, good morning, colleagues. Mae'n fraint ac yn blacker cael bod yma heddiw. It's a real pleasure and privilege to be here today. Just to say at the outset, I thought, thank you, Judy. Really, really brave, really courageous, and inspiring to hear. In terms of your account what's happened, and actually alongside this report today, then I think my first impression for us all are the things that we need to learn and to work together to do differently, to use that inspiration in a way to drive us, to transform and to change. I think there's some things in Wales we should be pleased about. Our starting position. I think it's fabulous to have an Older People's Commissioner championing, protecting, influencing. We were the first of the UK countries to have an Older People's Commissioner, and I think this report today, the work that you've done, Helena, and your team to produce this report is absolutely fantastic. Within the report, I think there are so many lessons to be learned, and it's really upon us all to work together, to review, and to, importantly, to be brave and change where we need to change to serve people and protect people differently. I think it's interesting when we look at protection, colleagues, and support, that sometimes, over the years, it's taken a time to get the learning together, and this report brings it into one place. So, I think it's excellent report and going to influence. I think there are some layers that we need to work on as well. We need to think about the roles of the National Independent Safeguarding Board and the local statutory safeguarding boards, and how they and the partner organisations can work together differently. I think that's the type of opportunity, colleagues, for Judy's story to be alive with police colleagues and others around those tables to really make a meaningful difference. For me, this will drive the conversations that I will be working on within the government and working with partners. I do believe that protecting older people is everyone's responsibility. We all share that, and we should all deliver together. And part of changing the way we think as a culture, as a community, is to really develop our forthcoming, as Helena mentioned in her opening, strategy. A strategy for an aging society. We are absolutely committed to preventing abuse of older people, and we'll now be looking to learn from this and to learn from yourselves, so that the action plan that we develop together, serves older people well in Wales. And in the report, I think it's a really hard-hitting report. Actually, I think it's emotional. It really connects. When I look at just a few headlines, and I won't stay on forever, Helena, I promise to stop talking at some point. But scammers, it's just it's atrocious. It's shocking. It's reprehensible, and you've really got to address those issues. When you look at the average age of a person being 75 as a victim, and the oldest person being 108. That really strikes home. For me, it strikes home. And I think Therefore, there are key points. Data is another issue that Helena and I have spoken about, and we really need from this report to drive forward and improve the way we collect data and the type of data we collect that therefore can enable us to make better choices, better decisions. Judy spoke eloquently in terms of accommodation issues. And I think we're at the beginning of a journey of thinking differently around, violence against women in terms of accommodation solutions. I think traditional approaches haven't been necessarily a good fit for people of an older age group, and therefore we do need to think differently. I think we've begun that journey. I think it's helpful to see recently some of the different thinking taking place. There was some monies made available for capital funding, for dispersed community-based appropriate accommodation. And I think for the first time, we've really begun to look at that and think about that in terms of, being accessible for older victims of abuse. And I think this is exactly the direction that we need to travel in. We have a wonderful opportunity coming up in terms of the review of our strategy in relation to VITA SV, and I think that's a good place to really drive forward. And I think my concluding opening comment really, I'm committed. I want us all to be committed together. It's absolutely, learning from this report, learning from feedback, learning from the views of Judy and other victims, to explore everything we can do within the report, all the findings, all the recommendations. But more importantly, we must now work to take the action required, listening to your views, the ways to transform services, for people, supporting people who are experiencing abuse, and provide the right support at the right time to make Wales that place that the Older People's Commissioner wants to see, and we want to see, the best country for people to grow old. Thank you, Helena.
Oh, Calvert, thank you very much indeed, and thanks so much for your commitment to this, and I think some really helpful reflections there about working with the National Independent Safeguarding Board and others on taking some of these things forward. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to come now to Anne for your reflections and thoughts on the action that we need to take.
Bore da, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be present today. You've given me a huge task, Helena, in giving an overview in a couple of minutes. I am a Welsh woman and we like to talk. I think my message is the fact that we need education and training, that's without a doubt, not only for organisations and agencies, but if we are putting the message over, it's for all society. And when people within our communities are looking for support, that they know where these agencies are. Judy, you mentioned the fact that there was a police officer who spoke to you and he had what you said was an understanding of the situation. Shouldn't that be the norm rather than the exception? That everybody who you should have come into contact with would have had that level of understanding. And also, I think we need to be thinking about who is the older person. Do we have a tendency to think that they are the very older within our societies? It's possibly the younger end as well. Judy, you said that you were in your 60s, obviously a very capable woman. Do these women sometimes present, as being capable and completely able to take charge of their own affairs? When that person sits in front of somebody in an agency, are they then seen to be a person who can cope? That person is also classed as an older person. The VITA SV Act defines the range of abuse, and that includes domestic abuse, sexual violence, coercive control, financial abuse, etc., etc. Do we always take sexual violence and sexual abuse, sexual harassment of the older person into account? Yes, we acknowledge domestic abuse, but sexual violence also takes place within this age group, and I think it's really important that we do not lose sight of that. I have talked about training and education, and also a great awareness of who can help. Who are these agencies? Where are they? I manage a national helpline, so it's really important that we have this database and that it's current and up to date. And at the touch of a switch, we can access information. I think also the report mentions the fact that it takes twice as long for an older person to make that disclosure. If they make that disclosure at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, where is their support for that person at 3 a.m. in the morning? That disclosure is hard enough to make. Now, if they've been sent away, you know, yes, you will be seen in a week or a fortnight. That person is carrying that around. They will not be sleeping that night. Do they know about the national helplines? So it's about that awareness raising of all agencies, that we should all be offering that wraparound support for these people. And again, you know, I've mentioned the fact that I do manage the national helpline. We have seen during the pandemic, and I will probably address this in my closing remarks, but we have seen all protected characteristics. You know, the numbers have increased during the pandemic. We are not out of the woods. I think all this talking about the easement of restrictions, we are only skimming the surface of problems. We have seen during the lockdown that older people have come forward, male and female. They are increasing in numbers. It's not just partner abuse, it is financial abuse. It's also child to parents or child to grandparents. All types of abuse are there, and unfortunately they are thriving.
And thank you very much indeed for your reflections, and I think also for just reiterating that the current sort of situation that we're in, actually, with increasing numbers of people coming forward, and important also to reflect the issue about older men as victims of abuse. And I know we've got a few questions on that, which we will come to in a while. And thanks also for all you're doing to raise awareness and to train. Really important work. Thank you, Anne. So I'd like to invite Rachel now. Rachel is the Director of Argyll's Cymru for your reflections, Rachel.
Thank you, Helena, and thank you for inviting us here today. I think it was really interesting what Judy said about the fact that when she engaged with Deras Choice, i.e. a specialist service for older people, that she got the help that she really needs. And that's what the report has shown, that there's a huge lack of services within Wales. And obviously that's something that with the Welsh Government and with the Stopping Abuse Action Group, we can work together to try and provide those services for older people. But it's about getting older people there in the first place. And we know there's a huge lack of reporting of abuse of older people, and a lot of that comes from a lack of awareness. Now, we don't know, because of a lack of data, how many older people are being abused in Wales. And that's physical abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, neglect, as well as coercive control. And that's abuse against women and men. A quarter of the people that contact our helpline are men, and that number is increasing. But what we do know from a polling survey that we did in 2020, the results are that 1 in 5 people in Wales are experiencing, older people in Wales experiencing abuse. So that could be anywhere up to 170,000 older people experiencing some form of abuse. Yet we know there is nowhere near that amount of figures within services or reporting to the police or even social services. And what we also found was that 1 in 5 people in Wales don't know what to do if they suspect abuse is happening and it's taking place. And that's what's really worrying, that people could be abused, but we don't know what the signs are. We don't know the indicators of abuse. And often older people, particularly those who've been experiencing abuse for decades, don't know that that's what it is. And also, you know, we work under strategies that do lend themselves to older women, or to women, and not so much older women, but aimed particularly at women. And there is a reason for that. But it's not just intimate partner violence that we're dealing with. According to our figures, over 1/3 of the perpetrators are actually adult sons and daughters, and it's violence that's taking place within a family setting. When we look at older people, and actually partners only only amount to 12% of the perpetrators. And I could bore you with statistics. I don't really want to do that, but it's what is important is this lack of awareness. And we know that we at Hourglass have provided, in fact, hot off the press today will be booklets on every type of abuse aimed at older people and those concerned about an older person, so that we start talking about abuse in all layers of society, at the top and decision makers and influencers, but also in the wider public. So that we can get people to that stage. But then we must have those services in place to support them. And I appreciate the time restraint, so I will stop there.
Lovely, Rachel, thanks so much. And I think very powerful statistics. And for those of you who don't know, Hourglass, it's a specialist organisation for older people who might be at risk of or experiencing abuse. And Rachel's been working as part of our steering group as well, doing fantastic work. And I think really important, that statistic about people not knowing what to do. And obviously that's partly why we're producing information and also the services directory. So I want to come on to the questions that are coming in now, and to start with that issue about the experiences of older men. A number of you have raised that in questions, and the research did look at this, and in finding that there weren't the services really geared up to older people, that was done even more so for older men. And we know also that as we get older, it's more likely that men might experience abuse than when they are younger. So it's a real big issue here. As the Older People's Commissioner for Wales, I've already committed to commission some work on the experiences of older men at risk of or experiencing abuse. This year, I'll be working with the abuse steering group on that. So we think there is more work to do to really uncover experiences and to look at what needs to happen. But ahead of that, I'd really like to ask the panel for your thoughts on what more can be done to support older men, both in coming forward and also in terms of the response that they receive. And Rachel, can I come to you first on that, please?
Yeah, sure. I think, as I said, I mean, a lot of it's about raising awareness, and we know that there's underreporting, but there is underreporting, particularly in older men, and there are specific barriers for older men. And a lot of that comes from shame and embarrassment, but also the imagery for any services. There's obviously a lack of imagery around older people in general, but particularly older men. And I know it's something that I'm very particular about when we do anything, that there are images of older men when we look at domestic abuse. As far as, I mean, the fact that you've been, you're doing the research and the action group is looking at this is paramount. As part of the action group, obviously, via you, I sit on the VAD SV strategy groups, and we are always raising, well, I say we, I'm always raising, as others are, the issue of older men as we look at developing that strategy. So I'm hopeful that that message is getting out there at all levels.
Thanks, Rachel. And you mentioned you were getting more calls from men now onto the Live Fear Free helpline.
Yes, we are, Helena, but we also, I'm going to reiterate again what Rachel's just said. I think it's about raising that awareness, and if we don't raise that awareness, then obviously we won't get those calls in. When I would say in the last 6 months, the demand to have awareness sessions for various agencies and organisations have increased tenfold to the helpline, and it's about getting that message out every time in every awareness session, that when we talk about the victim, it is absolutely everybody, because there's it is a cross-gender issue, so we make no differentiation whatsoever. Somebody presents with this issue with the helpline and they are supported fully. We also have to obviously take into account that many people now contact us via web chat, text, or email. So we don't always know either whether they are male or female. So like I say, the service is given across the board.
And thank you very much for that. I'm just aware that Nicole has to leave us now, so I just wanted to say a final thank you very much, Nicole, and look forward to working with you further.
Thank you. I was really interested in those last comments, so I'm so glad the panel's been able to address that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole. And Albert, any reflections, Albert, on this issue of support for older men and increasing awareness?
Yeah, thank you. And I agree with the comments of Anne and Rachel this morning. I think that there's a couple of reflections I have. One is that I think as a man, men, we sometimes struggle to share things that can be, as you said, for shame or embarrassment, but kind of some of it is almost deep rooted into childhood, into upbringing. And so there's something about new messaging, there's new stories, there's new awareness. So there's something in promoting. And I think imagery is one way of promoting. But I think there are other things about thinking about what it means in our culture, you know, what it means in our culture now to be an older man, and when you're at risk and you're vulnerable and you're really isolated because you know you're alone in that trauma and that experience, then we have to find new ways of reaching out. I think one way of doing that is through thinking about our approach as a nation in terms of awareness campaigns. I think alongside that then is about our training and our practice. So at another level, I think it's the way we engage, because that first point of contact when someone wishes to speak out and tell their story is so crucial, that they get the right support and the right messaging and the right, you know, enabling conversations at that time as well. So I think there's a lot to do with both strategy, but then getting into really thinking about our practice and the importance of those conversations and supporting and enabling conversations as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Albert, for that. Another question has come through about coercive control. It says that many older people are not clear on what coercive control means. Many have lived this way for perhaps 30 years or more and have accepted this as the way of life for them. It's a huge step for them to leave and accept that they've been abused all these years. How do we reach these people who perhaps are not fully aware that life doesn't have to be this way? I mean, I'd like to ask the panel that, but I'm also going to bring in Judy on that question in a moment, if I may, Judy, because I'm sure you might have some reflections on that. So anyone on the panel want to come in on that one?
I mean, I think it just comes back to awareness raising again, that, you know, if we can't reach people themselves, then it's about their family, friends, neighbours, anybody around them, GPs, pharmacists, people they visit regularly, librarians, well, when you've got transport to get there and if they're open still, or it's accessing all those different layers of engagement that older people can come into contact with, and then being aware as well of what coercive control looks like with simple language and language with easy to understand examples. But we know that, you know, and Judy was saying earlier about being in a rural location, it's very difficult to reach out to older people, and particularly older people that maybe don't normally engage with organisations. And we have to find a way that we, those communities aren't hard to reach, we're not reaching hard enough, and it's working together with partners to get to people for them to be aware of what might be happening to them.
Thanks, Rachel. I think, I mean, that point about rural communities is an important one as well, and it came up in the research actually that services are even more difficult to access if you're living in a rural area, and also issues about services in the Welsh language as well. More to do there. But Judy, just any reflections on this issue around, you know, people living with something for so long, not knowing it's called coercive control, or just it's become the way of life, really?
Yes, and I mean, it wasn't until victim support did the Dash questionnaire and asked me all these questions, and then thinking about it afterwards, and not really, and never having spoken to anyone, because everyone thought he was so wonderful. Yeah. Because in front of everyone, he was so wonderful. And I was the one that was the abusive one, according to him. And it is really hard. I mean, I thought, you know, I'm an intelligent woman. I was a university lecturer. I thought I understood about, you know, domestic abuse. I even taught people coming out of domestic abuse situations. And yet I didn't recognize it in myself, didn't recognize coercive control, and really didn't understand it until when I saw the counsellor for that short few sessions. She gave me a leaflet about gaslighting. Never heard of it. And it was sort of, oh my God, this describes my life. And then she told me about Evan Starks, and I listened to Evan Starks on YouTube and thought, that's my life. That's my life. And that's been my life for a long time. And so how you get other people to recognise that, you've got to make all of that available. And
yeah, and it shows the importance of the right person asking you the right questions to sort of enable you to share that and stop and think, but also that we need to be careful about the language that we maybe all use, but isn't language that is necessarily recognised more widely. Anne, you wanted to come in on that?
Yeah, let's not forget either the power of the soaps. You know, these stories crop up in the soaps, and if they are done effectively and show coercive control for what it really is, not just to have it, you know, over 3 episodes and then it's all sorted. Like Judy said, it's a gradual process. Have this story developed over a year, 2 years, because that's real life. And it's not always sorted by one phone call to the police. What about the other agencies? So I think, you know, whenever these stories are highlighted, you know, in the soaps or other TV programs, then that they are done effectively.
Yeah. Thanks. That's a really good point, actually, isn't it? About that, just making this. It's about awareness, isn't it? That and an understanding. Albert, did you want to come in on this question as well?
Yeah, just briefly, because there's a couple of things that struck me. One is that, you know, people, that we don't really understand, most of us, what coercive control is, you know, in terms of the experience, the lived experience. So that is important that we describe that. I think alongside that, there's got to be, so the soaps is a good way of doing that, but I think alongside that, you know, we've got to be really clear in our campaigns about rights, entitlements, the right and entitlement to be respected, to be safe, you know, and in any relationship, and what's unacceptable, you know, is obviously the flip of that. But we've got to get into that and really, you know, as a society, as a culture, be clear, this is how we live in Wales and what we expect. And that's today's generations, but also future generations. There is a question I have, Helena, maybe today is not for the answering of that question, but often we talk about, and I understand why, you know, the victim having to leave, and how do we support the victim in leaving. But I still have a question in my head about, you know, should the victim have to leave, and should we be thinking differently in society about the protections, about people, because you're not just making a choice to leave, you know, you're losing, as Judy described, you're losing your livelihood, all of the things that matter to you alongside that, and that's tremendous. So it's just a question. I think it's one that we should explore and debate and look at where we need to strengthen. And then the last one was, maybe it's a question in itself. You know, I think we think about those relationships, but clearly this research is also showing around financial abuse from, you know, siblings, you know, from sons, daughters, from other family members. And so there's something really big here to be clear about, because, you know, that financial abuse is an extraordinarily big problem for older people, and one that we have a responsibility really to grab hold of and do something supportive around.
No, I agree, and neatly done where the panel members are now asking questions as well, so we're getting into a good debate there. But I completely agree about financial abuse, and that's why it's really important that the research covered it, because it has such a big impact on older people. And we know, for example, that, you know, you're more likely to feel that you need to go into a care home if you've been financially abused, because it really shocks you. It can shock you to the core. It can really threaten your independence. And the point about having to leave brings me on to the whole question around accommodation. Actually, we did do some work on that last year, and I think we would all echo that view, that it shouldn't always be about the person who's a victim having to leave. If it's what they want to do and they feel that's the best decision, absolutely right. But it's also about the removal of the perpetrator. So we have done work on how we can improve accommodation support, and I know a lot of housing organisations are looking at that now, which is great. I'm going to take a glass of water actually in a moment, because you hear my, I've been a little bit croaky, but I want to ask a question particularly about the police, actually, because that's come up as an issue, and you know, why you feel maybe the police didn't act as quickly as they could have done in Judy's situation. But how are things changing at the moment? We know that the police are very much involved in in our action group, and they're doing some very good work there. So maybe Anne, you probably work quite closely with the police. So any thoughts on what's happening there and the developments there?
Yeah, we have been working closely with the police over the last, especially I would say the last 12 months. So we've got an initiative going with South Wales Police, and that started in November, where the police officer attending any incident of domestic abuse will promote the helpline. And if needs be, if that person's, the victim's phone has been taken away or smashed, will offer the use of their own phone for that immediate contact if required. I am also delivering lots of awareness sessions at the moment to the police forces. I've worked quite closely with Mike Taggart from North Wales Police in delivering awareness sessions to people in the beauty industry, in the barbering and hairdressers, because we know, these people are in close contact on a one-to-one basis with the victims. So it's about raising that awareness to all police officers. We know that now they have, domestic abuse champions within their forces, and those are being trained. So I would say, small steps, but we've got to start somewhere. I think what's heartening for me is to see the eagerness. Yeah. To see people being engaged, wanting to understand, the full remit of what domestic abuse is. So yes, I think we need to take heart.
Thanks, Anne, and I would completely agree. And it's terrific working with police forces as part of that action group. And I think that eagerness is definitely there. I want to come back actually to this issue of financial abuse and come to Rachel on this one, because it must be something that comes up a lot in your work. And just wondering what more can we do to highlight the issues and to enable people to get the support if it happens to them.
I mean, it does come up, but based on our helpline figures, it's normally the highest, it's high prevalence of abuse is financial abuse, although last year actually psychological abuse took over from that. I think there's an awful lot that we've done on scams over the years. We used to have the Wales Against Scams partnership, and I haven't heard much about that in recent times. But I also think, particularly for older people, there's more that can be done about the wider financial abuse that's taking place where, and I think Albert mentioned it earlier, where grandchildren are stealing from their relatives, where wills are being changed, where powers of attorney are being abused, where savings have been emptied and pensions are being claimed. It's such a wider issue than just scams, which obviously have a huge impact on older people. So I think it is looking at the impacts, as you said, about the consequences of what can happen when somebody's life savings are taken from them. But also making people aware, and again, it does come back to awareness, but backed up by services and action, that actually somebody making you change your will is financial abuse. Somebody keeping more money after they've gone for the shopping is financial abuse. And we have a specific financial abuse leaflet, and we offer advice on our helpline. But I know that Age Come, we do some work around this, as do other organisations. So it's something that a lot of us are working on, and I think continuing forward, the pandemic has seen organisations being brought together really well. The Stopping Abuse Action Group is one, Age Alliance is another, and we have to continue going forward working with trading standards and other organisations to strategise together and work together to address this.
I would agree, and I think that the way in which so many organisations are now working together, and it's been national training standards and others, and as Anne was saying earlier, that kind of eagerness of taking action. We've had a question also in about people living with dementia and their carers, and the particular vulnerability there to abuse, and just what can particularly be done there. And I wondered, Albert, if this might be something you might have some thoughts on. I know the Welsh Government's done a huge amount on support for people living with dementia, but this issue about where abuse and dementia can go together.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think, you know, this is it's an important point. I think that the first thing I would say is I think there's got to be a range of support services around people with dementia. And some of that I think is shown to be proven when it has advocacy and those good. I hope I'm still online because everybody else is frozen at the moment and I can't tell if I'm still on. So I'll
are.
just pause, and if you, I am still on.
You're
Great,
still on.
thank
We can
you.
hear you, Albert. Yeah.
Excellent, that's good, thank you. And I think really I would be citing, you know, dementia advocacy projects, you know, providing support, independence, you know, that kind of professional advocacy to older people, you know, and I think it's also then leads you into, you know, how do you support people with dementia, but support the carers around them in terms of recognizing when things are abusive and taking a course of the wrong direction. And, you know, certainly in the Welsh Government, we'll be looking at funding, you know, some of the dementia advocacy right up until the end of 2022. I think there's a couple of other things I'd like to raise related. I think when you think about dementia, there are so many sometimes services and agencies involved. So we just need to make sure that they're all, you know, aiming and doing the right action. So, for example, you know, some of our health colleagues will have a big role to play. And I think, you know, you've got real opportunity there, Helena, with some of the wealth of knowledge and experience. If they're able to respond early and identify early, then we can make some, you know, joined up interventions that can be supportive and enabling people to be safe and protected.
Thank you very much, Albert. So final question for the panel before I ask for your concluding remarks. And this is, what one message would you give to any domestic abuse organisation working now across Wales when working with older people? So what one message would you give to any domestic abuse organisation working now across Wales when working with older people? I'm going to ask Judy that one as well, just to give you a heads up. I'll come to you in a moment, but maybe if I could start with Rachel on that. Only one message.
I think it would be to ensure that everybody working for the organisation is aware of the specific risks and indicators and impact of domestic abuse on older people.
Lovely, thank you. And succinct as well, brilliant. Anne?
I would say listen to what's being said to you and don't dismiss it out of hand. Explore a little bit. Don't just take that the person sitting in front of you is possibly ill, disabled, or has dementia. What else is going on in that relationship or household? Thank you.
And Albert?
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, keep up the good work and listen and learn from this report, from the information and from the experience and the lived experience of people.
Lovely, thank you, Albert. And Judy, what one message would you have?
Well, Anne's taken mine. I was going to say, take time to listen, and it's not short term. You know, so many of the services I encountered, I was told could offer short term crisis help. What I needed, and eventually found with Darrow's Choice, thankfully, is long term, and taking time to listen and offer long term support, not just crisis intervention.
Thank you very much, Judy. So we've just got a few minutes left now, and I'm sorry if I didn't get through all the questions. I tried to get through as many as possible that were coming in, but I want to give every member of the panel now really an opportunity for any concluding comments, and would also like to offer Judy an opportunity for any concluding comments, having heard the questions and debate, having heard from Nicole earlier as well. So I'm going to come first to Anne, then to Albert, then to Rachel, then to Judy. So Anne, if I can come to you first, please.
I think, again, I'm taking heart from the number of participants in the webinar today. We're still on 175, and you know, that's testament itself that people want to help, want to learn. Of course, no meeting where I'm present would pass without me promoting the Live Fear Free helpline. We are there 24/7, 365 days a year, and not just for the victim themselves, but please, as professionals as well, if you're presented with somebody and you're not quite sure what to do, then pick up the phone. We're always there, and we will support you and the person that you've got sitting in front of you as fully as we can.
And that's lovely. Thank you very much, Albert.
Yeah, I'm keen, colleagues, to listen and learn from the participants on this call today, and then to use that knowledge and experiences and the report and the work of the Older People's Commissioner, to engage with the Welsh Government as a senior civil servant, but to work with ministers to improve the life chances of people. And I think there's real opportunities. So I think this is a time for change. It's a time for us to be brave and courageous and really think differently. And it's a time actually to change our culture to enable us all to work together to protect older people and ensure their rights and entitlements are at the forefront of everything we do. So I think this has been a really great opportunity, to inspire and actually then, make the right choices and actions, and some of the action plan work that I will be, leaning on will make sure that we take into account the learning and the experiences. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Albert. Thank you, Rachel.
Albert sort of said what I was going to say about this is a time now. We are, the report hopefully will propel us forward so that we can see changes. There are support services already here. We've highlighted some of the great ones in the report. There are resources, the new support service directory that you, the Commissioner, are hosting. We have a knowledge bank. We have resources on every type of abuse, as well as the helpline. Unfortunately, ours is not 24/7 because we're not able to do that. We wish we could. But I think when we talk about awareness raising and training, I think what's really key is actually what Judy's done today, which is have someone who's experienced the abuse to talk about it so openly. These are painful experiences, and I can't imagine how hard it is to stand up and in front of people and tell your most vulnerable secrets and your most distressing times. But I know that for us to really understand and for people to come forward, we need people who are as brave as Judy is, and who have that courage to speak about abuse, because that's the only way people really will listen. We can throw out statistics and we can have policies, but the general public and influencers respond to those impactful stories. So I think we need to encourage people that we work with to be able to do that.
I would completely agree, and I think enabling people to share their experiences in a way that works for them, and for people to know that they are then making a massive difference is vital, really, and potentially empowering as well. Judy, your thoughts?
I'd like to pick up what Albert said, and I said when I gave my talk before about accommodation, we need to break away from this idea that the solution to domestic abuse is to remove the person being abused and put them into a refuge. That's fine for some people. I'm not saying we shouldn't have refuges, but it's not the only solution. And this whole idea that you have to remove the person who is, I hate the word victim, but who is the victim. Instead of removing the perpetrator and protecting the victim, which is what happens in some other countries. And also seeing that refuges that's what I was told consistently and regularly, that I was refusing help because I was refusing to go into a refuge. It wasn't really refusing, that wasn't appropriate. That wasn't what I needed. So we need to break away from that one solution.
So I think really powerful, and I think break away from one size fits all and one solution. A lot about listening and understanding the diverse experiences of a diverse older population, and enabling people's voices to be heard. So we're just about at time now. We've just got a couple of minutes left. So I just want to remind you that you can find the research report on the Older People's Commissioner for Wales website, where you can also find the new website, which has all the support services available across Wales, and also the leaflet for older people, which we can also send out in hard copy as well. A number of you are making some additional references in the chat. So Anne's put up the Live Fear Free helpline. So please do make use of that, or contact Anne if you want to find out more. And of course, both the Live Fear Free helpline and the Hourglass Cymru helpline are available today. Should anything that we've covered today mean that you want to seek help or have a conversation. And just a final shout out to Rebecca from Eros, the housing network, that they are working particularly on good practice on domestic abuse in terms of all the people in sheltered housing and elsewhere. So that's really good to hear. So Diolch yn fawr, thank you all very much indeed for being with us this morning. Huge thank you to Judy, to Anne, to Rachel, to Albert and to Nicole. And a big thank you also to my team who've done all the hard work in getting ready for this event and producing such an excellent report. I do feel we're at a time of change, as you have all said. We've got the evidence now, we've got more voices of older people. It feels to me like we've got a shared commitment to do something in Wales to prevent abuse of older people, but also to make sure that those who are at risk of or experience it can get the help and support they need. So let's lead the way. Let's use today as a platform for further action together. And if you'd like to get involved in that in any way, then please do contact us. So a final thank you from me, and thanks for being with us today. Diolch yn fawr, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.